Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast, Birth Story Friday. In today's episode, we have Anna, who's going to be sharing her home birth story in Canada. In this episode, we're going to share her story first, and then Roxanne and I are going to break down strategies that you can use if you do experience a stall in your labor due to being afraid. Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you.
In today's episode, Anna is sharing her pregnancy journey and home birth story. In her story, she mentions she had pubic symphysis pain, or SPD, which I also experienced during pregnancy, and found us as a resource to manage and alleviate her pain, because pain is not a requirement of pregnancy, although you may feel like that. Anna used the MamasteFit prenatal fitness programs to prepare for her birth and have a comfortable pregnancy. In the MamasteFit prenatal fitness programs, we incorporate pelvic stability exercises plus thoracic and hip mobility to help keep you comfortable throughout your entire pregnancy. If you need more modifications, we include them in the programming, but are also available to answer questions for our athletes. Join the MamasteFit prenatal fitness programs for daily strength workouts. We offer our programming in the Team Builder app delivered as a list of exercises with demo videos or as an on-demand video that you can follow as you work out at the same time. Explore our programs at mamastefit.com/prenatal and use code STORY10 for 10% off.
Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. Today is Birth Story Friday, and we have Anna here who's going to be sharing her birth story all the way from Canada. Thank you for being here, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
So how was your pregnancy? What did you do to prepare for birth?
So my pregnancy was really pretty much straightforward by all recounts of comparing what other horror stories that people say. So very mild nausea. The biggest kind of uncomfortable thing that started happening was I got some pubic symphysis pain starting at around 18 weeks. And that was an unwelcome addition to my life. And that's actually when I started looking around on the internet, trying to figure out what it was, if it had a name, because at first I thought I just pulled a muscle while I was working out. Eventually I found out it had a name and it was a pregnancy-specific condition, and that's how I found your Instagram page. And then I started doing one of the exercise sets for the pubic symphysis pain, and then all the way until the end of pregnancy, that was kind of the only big thing that bothered me.
That's awesome. We're glad to help you have some more comfort throughout your pregnancy with our programming.
I know that pain well.
So what were you planning for your birth?
So I knew I wanted to have a home birth pretty much from the beginning. I have a family history of a home birth. I was a home birth baby. My sister was a home birth baby. So I grew up in a culture where that was just something really normal, and kind of this is an experience you can have if you are of sufficient, low enough risk. So that was something I was seeking out. And then I knew that in Canada we have the option to get a midwife that do home births, and they're just part of the healthcare system here. So the one caveat being is you have to call them the second you find out, because otherwise they're full. Basically, the week later, they're full.
That's similar for us here in North Carolina. You have to call immediately because there's just not that many available for the number of people that are wanting home births. So it's interesting to hear that it's similar in other areas where the demand is a lot higher than the number of providers available.
The midwives don't only do home births here. They will take you as a client, and then if you choose to have birth in a hospital, they do have hospital privileges. So it would be the same midwife no matter which location you choose. That's kind of one of the really nice things.
So there's just not a lot of midwives in Canada?
Yes, there's just not a lot of midwives. Yeah.
All right. So how was the very end of your pregnancy going into your birth?
Again, other than the normal pregnancy feelings of, I guess this is just happening forever, I thought I was going to go early because my mom went early for all three of us. So I thought I was going to be one of those. And then, 39 weeks rolls around and I guess I'm not one of those. So I guess I'm just going to be pregnant until I'm 42. But then, you do. Eventually labor does start. But other than that, it was easy. The one thing that happened was at the 39-week appointment, I started measuring a little bit less. So I was measuring right on track centimeter-wise. And then at the 39-week appointment, instead of measuring 39 centimeters, I actually went back to 37. And that made my midwife a little bit concerned. And she offered an ultrasound, which I declined at the time. But we agreed that a week later, if I was still pregnant, that I was going to go in for an ultrasound and a non-stress test. But we never got around to those.
Never made it to that appointment.
Yeah.
So then you went into labor like 30 minutes later, I think you said?
No. So that was my prenatal appointment. And one kind of interesting thing that happened is I didn't know my midwife had a student. And my midwife didn't know that I didn't know that she had a student who was shadowing her. And it just, by some fluke of, I guess, timing, I had never met the student throughout my pregnancy, despite the student being there for 5 months. And she was actually there for that last prenatal appointment. I didn't get an introduction because my midwife just assumed we were already acquainted. And I got a little bit stumped and was a little cautious in the moment with her in the room to say I'm not really sure what's going on, what's the protocol, kind of what's happening. And I was going to make a phone call the following day. But the following day I was in labor and not really thinking about what was going to happen. So right after that prenatal appointment, I went home and midnight I started to feel some contractions that still kind of felt like Braxton Hicks, but I wasn't sure. But I had already felt like I had Braxton Hicks for a week, and I had already had one false call of saying, I think today's the day, and it not being the day. So I didn't even, mention it to anyone. And then, labor started, despite me not noticing.
So how was your birth?
Very, very good. I would say it was rather on the shorter end. I started having contractions at midnight. I managed to fall asleep, but by 3 a.m. I was up. They weren't bad. I would kind of describe them as bad menstrual cramps, but can't sleep through them, but also not a big deal. Then I woke up, and at 6 a.m. I decided I was going to try to take a bath to see if I could fall asleep in the bath, which I didn't, but it was still relaxing. And then I was a little stressed. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to labor on 3 hours of sleep. That's not what I wanted. Then I realized you have to parent on 3 hours of sleep, which is
A little bit harder.
a little bit harder. And then kind of just very mild contractions all day. I kind of just went about my day, made breakfast, had lunch, went on walks, did the mile circuit, kind of just told my whole family to ignore me and pretend I'm not in labor. They're like, what's happening? I'm like, nothing's happening. Don't worry about it. Just go do life. Which, made my mom a little bit freaked out. Oh my God, are you going to have the baby right now? I'm like, no, I'm not having a baby at all. Don't worry about it. At 4 p.m., it was kind of obvious of okay, I can't. I wanted more support from my fiance. So I called him over. I told him he was working from home and he actually managed to work the full day. And I told him, okay, that's it. Time to stop working. He was actually on a call with his boss. And he's like, hey, I gotta go now. My fiance's about to have a baby baby, so I probably won't come into work tomorrow.
Won't be there tomorrow.
Did he know that you were in early labor, or did you?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He did.
Surprise, baby.
Yeah, so then 4, I was like, okay, I want you here. I want you to hold my hand. They set up the room, laid the sheets on the bed, put in all the sheets. And then we called the midwives. And I had texted her that I was in early labor, but I'm a first time. This is my first baby. So she was like, we'll see what happens. So at 4 p.m., I think things are happening. And she's like, okay, but I'm just at another birth. She's already had 2 births within 48 hours. And she's at another birth right now. And I'm like, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes. And then 6 p.m., we call her again saying, we want you to come over now, because it's starting to get into that state where I can't really talk. And my fiance, he's a great sport, but he's like, I want someone here who knows what's happening. And so we call them and basically she's like, well, I'm still at that other birth. So I'm going to send over the backup midwife who I hadn't met. So she comes in like kind of almost like sprinting up the stairs. And I'm like, whoa, what's the drama? Like, I've been doing this for a whole day. Like, what's the sudden rush to get my blood pressure and all that? But she checks me out and I'm mentally preparing like, okay, I'm only 2 or 3 centimeters. I'm not going to get disappointed when she tells me it's only 2 or 3 centimeters. It's okay. Like, it just started. Luckily I wasn't. I was 4 or 5. So like, you're like, okay, some progress. And then I was lying in bed at the time and she's like, well, if you want this to go faster, you have to get up, which was not what I wanted to hear. But I was like, well, I guess I'm going to get up. And then what happened is that she came in, and then 20 minutes later, the student of my midwife who I had just happened to have met the day before. So there's 2 people basically who I'm not really familiar with in my house. And I kind of get like a little freaked out. I'm like, I don't want them here. I want them to leave. I don't tell that to their face. I tell it to my partner. I'm like, you tell them I don't want them here. He's like, it's okay. You're fine. They're just here. And my labor kind of slows down. Like, I was having contractions every 3 minutes and they slow down. And I feel like I was feeling like I was drunk before, and all of that goes away. I'm completely lucid. And the midwife's like, well, you have to walk up and down the stairs to get labor to start going. So I start doing that. And then I would pause halfway through the stair, like halfway up down the stairs to have a contraction, like kind of swaying, making everyone kind of freaked out because I'm swaying up and down the stairs. They're like, hold on tight to her, make sure she doesn't fall. But it's okay. That manages to get labor back up. I go to hide in the bathroom because I'm too concerned. They're very nice people. Like, I don't want to tell them, but like, I feel weird about them being there. I'm like, strangers in my house, don't want you touching me. So I go and hide in the bathroom. They're like, can we come in, like, listen to the baby? I'm like, no listening to the baby, just hiding. Eventually they're like, okay, it's been 20 minutes. We have to come in and do like a fetal heartbeat check. And I'm like, okay, fine, you can touch me. Then things just kind of keep going. So this is like they came in at around 6. And at around 9, I'm like, okay, I need to know if there's been any progress because things are starting to get hard and I don't know. So they check and I'm 8 centimeters, which is good news. I was very happy to hear that. I'm like, okay, this is good. I keep laboring. I had a pull-up bar set up with some rings, and then I'd use those to like hang in the squat. And then eventually I'm like, okay, I need to be checked again. And then I kind of tell myself, well, I can't be checked again. It's only been like 45 minutes since I was last checked. I can't keep checking because like I'm going to disappoint myself. But I get checked and she says, you're 9.5 with a cervical lip. So you can try pushing, see if it feels good. I try. It does not kind of feel like anything. Don't really want to, but I get the feeling that like I want to poop. And everyone says like, I'm like, okay, I need to poop. Maybe I'll poop. And that will make it easier for me to have a baby. Cause like they keep telling me like, make sure you keep drinking, keep peeing. So I go sit down on the toilet. I try to poop and my water breaks instead. And all the lights are off in the bathroom and the student midwife's quickly like turning. I'm like, my water broke. And midwife's like in the bedroom. She's like sprinting over to check like what color the amniotic fluid, and they're using their phone flashlight to like shine into the toilet. But I managed to break my water with basically 0 mess. And like, it's all clear, you're good. And then she's like, okay, well, maybe like now you can like try pushing, it'll feel good. And I try, and somehow I was like really ready to like deal with the contractions, like had mentally prepared that it was going to be this hard thing. But nobody told me pushing wasn't going to be like a process. Like for some reason that caught me off guard. Like I thought, okay, contractions are over, I'm dilated, that's it, I'm done. But somehow like I missed
surprise.
Just kidding.
I missed the whole part of the baby still has to come out. And so I tried pushing. She's like, see, it feels good. And I'm like, this does not feel good. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're telling me you have had children before. Going to the beach feels good. Swimming feels good. Pushing does not feel good. I don't like this. And so like a contraction comes and like I just don't push because it does not feel good. And like all of a sudden I'm scared of tearing. I'm scared of pushing because like I don't like how it feels. And the midwife basically says, well, we can do this for some amount of time, but like eventually if you don't push, like we're going to have to take you to the hospital. And I'm like, oh shit, you're telling me there's no option here.
There's only one way through.
You gotta do this or you gotta do this or you gotta do this. So I decide I am gonna push because at least if I push, it'll be over faster. And then at that point, it was 10 p.m. and my contractions slowed down. So originally I was going to push in. We have a really big tub and I tried to get in and I couldn't like get comfortable as I was squatting down. And then I got scared that previously when I took my bath earlier, my labor really slowed down when I was in the tub. So I was getting really scared that combined with the fact that my labor had slowed down with the midwife came, that if I got into the tub, the contractions were going to completely stop. So I ended up just going towards the bed and the contractions did stall out. Like I was having a contraction once every 5 minutes. From what I know, that's unusual. Usually they don't spread out quite that much. So despite that, I think I pushed her out in 4 contractions. Like one, I could feel her going down, and then the third one she crowned, and the fourth one she was born. But I did tear, so I was kind of thinking that I did push too fast. Like I got over enthusiastic of just getting it over with. And
I understand why you did that.
Crowning is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And then she was born, and afterwards is kind of when I saw what the midwives were there for, because prior to her being born, she just kind of sat in the room. She'd come over, check baby's heartbeat, and then, continue charting or whatever else she was doing. I'm not sure. But after she was born, that's when like everything, like their part started. Like I lay down in bed, I got handed the baby, but all of a sudden they're like rushing around, like checking my vitals, checking the baby's vitals, making sure the placenta's born, and then like cleaning up and, doing all the things, stitching me up. But other than that, it was just nice to be right at home. And it was really very much kind of what I got what I wanted out of that home birth.
That's awesome. Do they do postpartum visits at home as well?
Yes.
That's amazing.
My actual midwife came back.
Oh, okay, good. How many visits do you get postpartum?
So I think we had 4. So you had one at the 24-hour mark, one at the 3 days, and then I think one at 4 days and one at a week. And then afterwards you do in-clinic visits until 6 weeks.
Okay. If you did a hospital birth, would you get that same frequency?
Yes. So if you are with the midwives, you are allowed to do what they call early dismissal. So where you give birth in the hospital, but you're allowed to leave within 4 or 5 hours. And then you go home. And the reason you're allowed to leave is because within 24 hours, they'll come and do a checkup on you in your home.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Is that like standard in Canada, or is it only in like your area?
So it's standard for Ontario. I can't speak to other provinces.
Okay.
There aren't midwives all over. So if you can get a midwife, that's how it would work. But there's not that many of them. And not everyone knows that they exist because there's just not that many.
Yeah. That's really cool.
But that would be the standard.
That's really awesome that even if you had to transfer to the hospital, or if you risked out of home birth, that you could still have the same midwife providing care for you in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
And that you still get the same postpartum care regardless of where you give birth. That's really cool.
No, that's super cool, I think.
What advice do you have for others that are maybe considering home birth or maybe even live in Canada and want to know about their options?
My biggest advice is make sure you know which clinic you're going to call. They joke, like the midwives joke, you pee on the stick, you call us, and then you call your partner. Like that's how early they book out
For home birth.
Just home birth or not. Like they will take you and then you make the decision of where you want to give birth. You don't have to make that decision right away. My other biggest advice would probably to just do your research. The reason I recommend the midwives, regardless of where you give birth, is actually my biggest takeaway from this was, as much as I loved my home birth experience, what I liked even more is the midwives. They're very strong about being not pro-choice. You have the responsibility over your own pregnancy. So every procedure that is offered of, this is what the standard of care is. This is the risks for this procedure. This is the risk against. And then it is your decision about what action you're going to take. And they're very much, we can offer you our professional guidance, but we're not going to make the decision for you, whether it's about where you're going to give birth or whether or not you're going to have the tests like GBS or ultrasounds or whatnot. And if you decline a test, they're going to say, okay, and you kind of move on, like knowing that it is your choice for each individual procedure. So that was something that I really liked and why I highly encourage everyone, regardless of their preferences, to seek them out because I think it's really great care. Other than that, just being informed about your own pregnancy and what that's like, and don't be like me, pushing is hard, but it will be over, I guess. Yes, prepare for pushing.
Yeah.
Prepare for pushing.
Pushing, I think, is the most intense part of birth for me. And I don't think that everyone is prepared for how intense it is. I'll be curious to hear how it is if you guys are planning on having more children.
Yeah.
What it's like for you. When do you know you're about to start pushing for your second? Because for me, with my second home birth, I was like, I knew what to expect. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't want that. Like, that was a lot. And then it's over really quick. And I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Let's have another.
Yeah, that was basically the first words of, I'm laboring and I'm like, hey, I'm never doing this again. Like, that's it. One's enough. And then I have her in the first words of my mouth. Okay, let's do one more.
It's like, we need more. We need 8.
Let's have 7 more children, please. This is amazing.
Midwife's like, hold on, 6 weeks first, and then we can talk about.
Can we clean the blood off first before we start talking about more children?
No, it's like a rush. With hormones?
Hormones is
but it's like the specific, one specific hormone.
Oxytocin.
But it's like you just get this like high. Yeah, the birth high, and it lasts for, I feel like, days.
Yeah,
after you have a baby, and it clouds your judgment.
It clouds the memory of what happened.
You forget the discomfort of labor and pushing a baby out.
Yeah, next time I would really try to maybe see if I can get comfortable in the tub. I'm not sure. Maybe if the contractions do space out, maybe not being as scared that they will never come back, because I was genuinely scared if I'm going to get into the tub, I'm not going to have contractions at all. And I'm just going to stay in this weird limbo forever.
Yeah.
And so maybe giving it more than a 2-second shot of squatting down into the tub.
The tub is hard for a lot of people, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do find that contractions tend not to be affected by the tub when you're in active labor. It's usually like early labor that they might space out. And it is normal for contractions to space out up to 5 minutes when you're pushing, because it gives baby more of an opportunity to recover between pushes. So that it is pretty normal that they went to 5 minutes apart.
And also,
you might not have one of them to go to 5 minutes apart, but it is helpful.
And allows you to rest in between pushes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your home birth story with us. It's really cool to hear how similar and also different birth is in other countries. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast to share your story with our listeners.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Hi, I'm Chris. When my wife and I first found out we were going to be parents, I was admittedly pretty overwhelmed. I had no idea what to expect during pregnancy, labor, and birth, and I knew I wanted more than anything to be able to confidently support my wife during what would be one of the most physically and emotionally intense experiences of her life. Deciding to take the MamasteFit childbirth education course truly changed my entire outlook from being nervous and unsure of what to do or say to feeling calm and prepared to advocate for my family. In the MamasteFit childbirth education course, I learned what to expect overall, how to read the stages of labor, and tons of different comfort techniques to better support my wife during them, and most importantly for me, what questions to ask and what rights we were entitled to with our birth provider and location. We learned how to communicate our birthing desires, and I felt so much more equipped to calmly stand my ground and be a rock for my wife where I otherwise would have felt unsure of how to avoid just feeling like another helpless body in the room. I know for a fact this course elevated my experience as a new father, and then again when we welcomed our second baby, and I cannot recommend it more to all birth partners out there. Thank you, Gina and Roxanne, for all that you do to educate and empower us.
In Anna's story, she talked about how her labor stalled a few different times due to this new person showing up in her birth, or at different points where she was feeling really afraid. And this is a common thing that can cause your labor to stall, and it doesn't have to be a prolonged stall. It can just be a slight pause in your labor. And so typically we might see like pauses in labor when we transition from one location to another, such as going from your home to your birth location, such as your hospital birth or your freestanding birth center birth, or when new people enter the room. So if you're at a hospital, like a new person entering the room that you maybe don't know, or if you're at a home birth, like new people showing up to your house that you haven't maybe met before. And so different strategies that we can use if your labor is starting to pause because you're feeling afraid of something that's going on, or maybe you're not feeling safe with like these new people that are entering your space, is one, we can move and we can kind of retreat to a place that's more quiet, such as the bathroom. So that's like a really good place to kind of hide in as you kind of try to collect yourself and try to figure out like, who are these new people in my space? And so if you can't go to the bathroom, or you don't want to go to the bathroom and you kind of want to confront whatever is going on, it can be helpful to just ask people to introduce themselves. So, hey, who are you? Like, I don't know who you are. Or your partner could even introduce themselves to be like, hey, my name is whoever I am. My name is David, and you are. And that kind of prompts them to realize that maybe you don't know who they are and that you would like them to introduce themselves. Another strategy that I find to be really helpful, and something that I used in my first birth where there was a lot of people in the room that I did not know, was I asked my nurse to introduce everyone to me, because I was not familiar with this party that was going on in the room as my baby was being born. And so having people introduce themselves can be a really great option as well. If you are feeling afraid of your birth or your labor or something that's going on in the space, doing a fear release can be really helpful. And so one, it can be helpful to figure out, is there anything that you're afraid of while you're pregnant before we make it to birth? And so this can be kind of a underlying fear that you have of labor in general, such as there's something that happened to your mom or to like close friends or other people's like birth trauma that you're afraid is going to happen to you. And so this is like a common thing that I'll see for clients of mine whose moms maybe had a more traumatic experience, is they're afraid that same experience is going to happen to them. So addressing those fears before you go into labor can be really helpful. And so when we're addressing our fears, we can sit and think, okay, what am I afraid of? Allow yourself to feel that fear and to acknowledge and validate those feelings, because whatever it is that you are feeling is totally valid, regardless of how rational or irrational it is. And then after you've kind of allowed yourself to admit that this is something that you're afraid of, either just to yourself, maybe to your partner or a trusted person in your life, then we're going to kind of assess, is this a rational fear? Is this something that like could legitimately happen? And if so, how can I mitigate that? What courses of action can I take to kind of decrease the risk of it occurring? Is there anything that I can do to minimize this risk to me? Or is it an irrational fear? Like there's no way that this would ever happen, or it's such a small risk that like the likelihood is so insignificant. Okay, I'm going to let this one go and acknowledge that it's not a valid fear for me to be having anymore, and then kind of go from there. So now you've acknowledged what your actual fear is. You've allowed yourself to feel whatever it is that you feel about that fear. And then we're developing a plan. So, okay, this is a rational fear. This legitimately could be a risk to me. Let's figure out some strategies to mitigate that risk. And then, okay, this is an irrational fear. The likelihood of it ever happening is pretty insignificant or minuscule. I'm going to go ahead and release it and let it go. And so doing this during pregnancy gives you more time to kind of process it, and is obviously a beneficial time to do it. But if you wait until labor, a strategy that I found is to just do the same thing, but just kind of address the elephant in the room. And so if your labor is stalling, or it's just not progressing, or maybe you're stuck in early labor, like you're being induced and things are just not going, I find that one, we need to kind of set the labor vibe in the room. So we're going to turn the lights off, we're going to dim the lights, we're going to get really quiet voices, we're going to play some soft music. If you're into essential oils, you can diffuse some smells that are really relaxing to you. So we're going to set the labor vibe. And then we're going to acknowledge what those fears are. And we're just going to call them out. We're going to be very like deliberate and confrontational about it. So, hey, are you afraid that this is going to happen? And then usually once we kind of acknowledge the fear, we have a big release of like crying and kind of emotions releasing and letting it go. And then we develop a strategy like, okay, that was what you were afraid of. It's totally valid that that is what you were fearful of. Like you shouldn't be ashamed of that. It's totally fine. Let's figure out what a part of this is rational versus what is irrational. What can we do right now to mitigate your fear versus what can we do to just let go of something that maybe we really need to be fearful of? And so we can do that in labor, but we need to set the vibe of the room. So set your labor vibe, and then we're going to address the fear and do that same fear release strategy. So if during pregnancy, obviously the beneficial time to do it before we're in labor is to release those fears. So, hey, what am I feeling? I'm acknowledging that this is a fear for me without any shame. Feel whatever it is that I feel about it and let it go. And then I'm going to develop a strategy. Is this a rational fear? What can I do to mitigate it? Versus, is this irrational? And what can I do to just let it go? If we're in labor, it can be helpful to set the vibe first for labor. So dimming the lights, quiet voices, soft music, maybe diffusing some oils or certain smells that are really relaxing to you. And then we do that same strategy. Acknowledge what I'm feeling, allow myself to feel it without shame. Is it rational? Develop a plan. Irrational? Let it go. And then if you have people that are entering the space that are maybe what are causing that stall for you or that fearfulness is one, retreat to a quiet place such as the bathroom to kind of collect yourself and let yourself realize that these people are here, that they are safe, they are not going to harm you. Or we can also just have them introduce themselves and let them know like who they are, which is another great strategy. So ideally, we are addressing our fears of birth and labor while we're pregnant. But if you do wait until labor to address your fears or they pop up during labor, we could use a strategy to release the fear, let it go, realize that we are safe and supported so that we can then have our labor continue to progress from there.
Thank you for joining us today and listening to this episode. If you want more support throughout your pregnancy, join our prenatal fitness programs and childbirth education course. If you need more support after birth, join our postpartum fitness programs and education courses. If you're a professional, we offer birth worker and fitness trainer courses so you can learn from us and earn CEUs. Explore all of our courses on our website at MamasteFit.com and use code STORY10 to save 10% off all of our programs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow our podcast to be notified when we release new episodes. Leave a review and share with your friends. We release new episodes every Wednesday and new birth stories every Friday.
So thank you for listening to the MamasteFit podcast.